have been making several sourdough recipes, and as a matter of fact, I've already shared one of them on this channel. And I thought before I share those very delightful recipes with sourdough, it would be good for me to begin by sharing the process of how I make my own sourdough starter to begin with. I've been learning about sourdough and having fun doing it to an extent that I feel confident to begin to share content on sourdough. And I hope that my process of doing this would encourage you and I to know that you can make very delightful, very nutritious recipes in a more healthy way, because really that's what hospitality is about, finding ways of making recipes more healthy and more nutritious. So join me in today's recipe as I show you how I make my own sourdough starter in a very simple way. Please join me. Welcome to Recipes and Hospitality with Clara. This is a channel where we share recipes that are simple, easy to do at home with ingredients toned down, just like this one, to enhance your hospitality for the glory of God. And if you're new here and this is the kind of content you like, kindly consider subscribing, hit the notification bell. You'll be notified every time I upload new content. I upload this kind of content that I trust will be very helpful for you and me, of course, and I work with ingredients that are most likely available right where you are. I shared in a previous video why I love sourdough. Like I said, the sourdough starter works on your ingredients in most of the sourdough recipes, breaking them down and making it easier for your body to digest them. And as you know, sourdough starter is making your raising agent the natural way. This would be the best way to go as you think about working on recipes. And of course, this is what hospitality is all about, finding ways of coming up with healthy, nutritious recipes for our households. If you don't have an oven, if you don't have a fridge, don't worry. You can still work with your sourdough starter without a fridge as well as without an oven and still come up with very delightful recipes. As is always our custom on this channel, we will pray and trust the Lord to grant us a fruitful time as we work on this particular recipe. Indeed, Father, we pray that you be with us and grant us your help and your fruitfulness, especially as we work on this recipe. And even for anyone doing it for the first time, I trust that the process would be a blessing and you will help them so that it will work out for your glory. Be with us in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's begin working on our sourdough starter. I'm using a plastic container, just sizable, with a lid that I can cover loosely. It can cover tightly, but I need a lid that will just stay on top, but rather loosely. The other kind of container you can use is a glass jar or a glass bowl, also with a lid that you can also cover loosely, because you need air to circulate in there, and also as it releases air, it can also have a place to escape. Then that's the type of flour that I use. I normally will use atta because sourdough starters will do very well with whole wheat or wholemeal grains. It can also work with all-purpose flour, but that will be a slower process, so I prefer this. I also used Ajab's atta, and I think it worked. For those in our country, you know Ajab, but this is really my favorite one, the butterfly stone ground atta or whole wheat flour. So we will work with equal amounts of flour and water. That is half a cup of flour and half a cup of water. I just work usually with my cup. I don't do a lot of measuring because I realized also with my working with sourdough for multiple times, I would say now, I know sourdough can be very forgiving, the starter. So even if you don't have your measurements, you know the exact, it will still work very well. So this equal amounts of flour and water, we are looking for 100% hydration because you have the ingredients in equal amounts. So I'm going to mix these ingredients up until I have fully incorporated everything, as you can see. Then I will go ahead and cover and place perhaps in my pantry or a place in my kitchen where it will not be disturbed. Room temperature or even warm is really better, but I'm working in the colder months in our country. This still worked very well because it's not really winter, it's cold, but we still had our sourdough. Took perhaps a day extra, but it still worked. So cover loosely and then give it 48 hours. 48 hours means 2 days. So we will keep it and come back after 2 days. This is 2 days later. Let's take a look at our sourdough. I just decided to cover it with a paper towel because once the flour begins to ferment, as you know, if you are in a place like where I live, it will start attracting fruit flies. So I try to just keep them at bay like that. So you can see it has started kind of fermenting, but don't let this fool you. We still have a while to go, or a long way to go, if I would say that, because this first one really is not enough for us to make sourdough. We will need to go a few more times because usually it will do like this, but by the second or third day it will look like there's no activity happening. You won't see any of this that we can see that shows that there's some sourdough activity happening. So what I'll do is I will stir it. This is after 2 days. Some people will begin working to discard some of it, but personally on the first day I do not discard anything because I just like to have as less amount of discard as possible, at least to prepare me to be able to work with my discard when I need to. So from now we will again add half a cup of flour and half a cup of water, the same, but this time we will start feeding it every 12 hours. So this is evening around 9 in the night, so I will feed it again the next day at 9. Those are a total of 12 hours. I don't do the exact time. Like I said, sourdough can be forgiving, but just try to keep to that schedule as much as possible. So again, I will stir in this until it's well stirred, and then just to keep again fruit flies at bay, I like to keep my container as neat as possible. So I've taken a piece of paper towel and just wiped the surface just in case some of it went on the surface, and then I'll cover it loosely. And this second time I will start covering it with my clean kitchen towel because this will keep the fruit flies at bay even better. And then I'll return it to where I keep it, again room temperature or warm if you can get a place in your kitchen that is warm, but room temperature will still work very well, or in your pantry. As you can see from the video, this is the next day, 12 hours later. Again, I'm going to stir it, and now we will start discarding half of it. So I will stir it. You can see it still looks bubbly, but I know by the third day it will look like nothing is happening. So don't be surprised. Or even when you start and you don't see any activity, just know you need to be patient. Keep feeding it every 12 hours after that initial feeding, and eventually it will get bubbly and ready for you to use. So once we have stirred, we are going to get half of it out. If you wanted to measure to be exact about the amount of half you're using, please go ahead and do so. Personally, I have now worked with sourdough multiple times, as I said, and I can tell it's quite good to work with. So I have just eyeballed and set aside half of it. So once you've set aside half of it, I'll tell you what we will do with that half that is called the discard, because it's like you're discarding it. We will now continue feeding the half cup of flour. As you saw, I just try to keep it at half. I don't really measure, and half a cup of water, and then stir. By the way, I like to first stir the flour in and then I add in the water. This time I've done both of them. I find when you first stir in the flour, it will mix better, and then pour in your water, half a cup or so, and stir, cover, and then again cover with your kitchen towel, and then set it aside or in the place that you know it will not be disturbed. Now let me say something about this discard. It's called discard, but really it's not discard because you are going to use it. I'm going to share with us on this channel a number of recipes with which I make my discard. So just keep it, cover it and keep it aside, and then we will continue. Now this is it the third day still, but 12 hours later, because you remember that was morning. But just remember this in case I'm losing some math in my doing this, but you can see I have written on the screen hopefully. But just keep in mind you're feeding it every 12 hours. So it's starting like I'm doing, discarding half of it and then feeding the remaining with half a cup of flour, half a cup of water. I hope that now is clear. So let's go ahead and do that. So I've stirred, as you can see. Still a bit bubbly, but I know by the, should be the fourth day now, it will not look as bubbly. It will look like actually nothing is happening, but different starters will behave differently. So we will discard half of it as is the custom now. I have added it into the previous discard, the first discard that we did, and then add our half cup of flour and half a cup of water. So that's the discard. Like I said, don't get rid of it. I like to keep collecting the discard up to perhaps 4 discards, and then I can work with it. 3 to 4 discards actually. This is 12 hours later. I think because it will be hard to keep up with this schedule, just remember it's 12 hours, so morning and evening, and then I will share with us the which day it actually became sourdough starter that we can use, because like I told you, the weather is cold right now, so it took one more day, I would say, than it usually will take. So there I am again eyeballing my sourdough. By the way, you can use an actual cup to measure so that you're sure you are discarding half of it. So our flour again goes in there and our water. So like I said, I like to do the flour first so that once it starts mixing in very well, and then I add in the water, and then we will be ready to go. So now I will not show you anymore because I really it would be boring, but I kept feeding it every 12 hours, collecting the discard, because the first 3 discards I used that for a recipe, and then I started collecting new discard for another recipe, and I kept working at this until it eventually turned into sourdough starter, the one that you can actually bake with. This is the sourdough discard that I am working with. I did a very delightful pancake recipe that I will share the actual measurements with the amount of discard you might have. Once it's on the channel, I'll link it below. We finally have our sourdough starter. I don't know if you can see it. It has formed very nice bubbles, and you can see as I'm stirring it, it's getting really bubbly. And by the way, I really hope that this will be the sourdough starter I'm doing from scratch in a long time, because I want to challenge myself to see whether I can sustain it until the time I'll be able to get a fridge. If I find a way of doing it, I will share it on this channel. If I don't find a way of doing it, it is well. I will keep making more sourdough next month, because really it's no longer a challenge for me to do that. Now I know that I'm able to make my sourdough in a week. So this one actually took a week exactly, because I worked on it from Thursday evening, and this is Thursday. Actually, with sourdough, what I've realized, the longer you can work with it, because this one I'm going into the 2nd week at the recording of this voiceover. We are almost getting to 2 weeks. It's getting really bubbly, more and more bubbly. I wish I could show you. If I can be able to get some overlay pictures of how it looks, I will show it as I'm doing this, but if I don't, it is well. But the longer you can work with it, the better. That's why I said if you can store it in the fridge and just feed it once a week. When you need to bake, ensure, like if you're baking in the morning, ensure to remove it the previous night and feed it so that you can use it the next day. When it stays longer, it gets really bubbly. But I still am finding it's not very bubbly as I would want it to be actually. So what I'm going to do, I will still feed it so that I bake with it on Saturday. So I'm going to feed it 2 more days so that it can get even more bubbly. Like I told you, it's cold, so it's taken a little longer than usual. After the 2 days, I will feed it usually for about 4 days, but now I've fed it for 5 days, as you saw. So I'm still going to give it another 2 days of feeding, but basically it's good to go. Yeah, so this is Saturday morning. I don't know if you can see, it's fermented really nicely, as you can see. I just wish I had taken a closer picture, but you can see what I'm seeing. That's why I said the longer it takes, the more bubbly it really gets. So I know it's ready for us to work with it. So I'm really hoping I'm up with a way of keeping it going for even a month or 2 or a year, I don't know. But if I manage to keep it even for a month or 2, I should share the process. This is Sunday morning. Now see how it looks. So the longer it goes, the bubblier it gets, if there's any English word like that. So now I want to share some of the recipes that I'll share on this channel, but that I worked with this particular sourdough. That was the sandwich bread, no oven. And that's why it's not shaped like the oven, but I am sharing also one there, as you can see, where I worked with it in the oven. It came out really delightfully, and that you can work with it to make sandwiches. Then I also did those delightful mahamri. All these recipes I would share, and then the pancakes where I made use of my discard, and you can see all those recipes. I hope to keep sharing recipes as they come of how I am working with my sourdough. I really am loving sourdough, so share in the comments your experience. I hope you will enjoy as well. I trust that the process I have shared has made a lot of sense, and you can try it on your own, and I'm hopeful that you will love the entire process. So thank you so much for joining me. In case you missed that first recipe, you could find it linked right here, and of course you can find a developing playlist of other sourdough recipes that I'm going to be working on this channel. Very simple, no oven, and I'm hopeful that you will love and enjoy them. Look out for our next recipe, a very delightful one as well. And until that recipe, see you then, or see you in this recipe linked right here.